We are here at the home of Mrs. Malissa Hurt. It is June 29th, 2017. My name is Paul Ortiz, and I'm with Venetia Pons. We're researchers from the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. And I wonder if we could begin by having each of you introduce yourselves.
I'm Vanessa Bonner, the great granddaughter of Oscar Mack.
I'm Malissa Hurt, and I'm the great-granddaughter of Oscar Mack.
I'm Marvin Brown. I am the great-great-grandson of Oscar Mack.
All right. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed. We feel really honored and blessed to be with you. This is such an amazing story, and we were all just, frankly, just so excited and really in tears yesterday at the memorial service for Oscar Mack.
Yeah.
And I wonder, Mrs. Hurt, if we could start with you and telling us what that memorial service meant to you.
It meant a lot to me because of my grandfather. It was late in coming, but it got there. And if he were living, he would appreciate it. My grandmother too. He struggled a lot. He was scared a lot. But God took care of him. Finally. And I appreciate all the work and effort that you all have done for him and for me and for my family. I appreciate it. And I thank you, thank you, thank you. If it wasn't for you all, this would never have come out. This would never have come out. And I don't know how to express it. I just wish some of the people that traveled with him through life, whatever friends he had, are blessed. Like he was blessed yesterday. And I want to thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord, most of all. Thank you. It's all right. It's all right. It's all right, Grandpa. It's all right. I'm sorry.
Marvin, you were talking yesterday about the funeral and your thoughts about the memorial service yesterday. Could you share some of those thoughts?
I would say that that it opened to me a bigger picture of him compared to as a kid that I first discovered who he was or aware of his existence at the day of his funeral. His actual funeral in 1960, January. As a kid, because I didn't know much about him at all. I didn't know he existed. But with the program and all, and the research team coming up here, and then plus it just opened more history about him. I know we were searching and we were getting bits and pieces. We had letters and information about him passed on by word of mouth. And to allow this thing to come to, I would say, in a reality in my thinking. I was very impressed I was impressed with my brother and sister. They worked very diligently to get this project off the ground. And then my aunt Sharon with me back in the year of 1999, actually who he was. And even then, I didn't realize who this person was. He was a human being. He worked. He was a businessman. I didn't know he had fought in World War I, which was the Great War. So it was a very exciting moment for me yesterday, and even now, as I'm being of this interview.
Vanessa, you wrote an amazing poem for the memorial yesterday. Can you talk about
Lord,
that?
Yes.
Well, initially I had asked my sister-in-law if she would read a poem, and she said sure. And she said, so she had a poem of another person that had been lynched, and Emmett Till. And I said, but he wasn't lynched. I said, we need something else. And she said, well, why don't you write a poem? If you write a poem, I'll read it. I said, oh, okay. And I sat down and I started writing, and it was as though I became him for a minute. That I saw myself running and feeling the fear. And I just felt like he helped guide me, his spirit helped guide me to write this poem. And he had a message for us that we have to bring love out of the fear and and to overcome the hatred. And it's not about revenge, but it's about love. And bringing closure, to bring closure. Also, there was strength. I felt strength. And it was applicable to what's happening to my own self, through things I've gone through. And it brought understanding. So.
When did you first read the poem? Did you practice in advance? Did you read to a family member?
I did. I called my aunt and read it to her. And you become this child again, like, I need some, how can I put it? I need to know if it's okay. And she was like, oh, it's beautiful, it's beautiful.
And then I started hollering and screaming and jeez.
I was going to ask you what you thought, Mrs. Hurt, when you first heard the poem, but you were excited. And
I was excited. I was a little sad on some of points that even in her life she had gone through. So it was kind of like a double whammy to me. Mm-hmm. But the poem was beautiful. And I started crying and, but it was a wonderful, wonderful feeling that she gave me with that poem. And if my grandfather had been here, I think he would have enjoyed that. Because it would have been part of what he went through. Yeah.
Mrs. Hurt, can you tell us about your first impressions of your grandfather, like how you knew him as a young person?
I was like, I guess 8 or 9. And my sister and I, when they moved to Sicklerville, New Jersey, we would go up there every summer and stay a couple weeks. And they lived in the country. And with the chickens and all of that that comes with the country
Yes,
and the farm. But my sister enjoyed it. I didn't. I love them, but I that outdoor thing was not for me. It still isn't. And then they had the toilets outside,
Outhouse.
outhouse. But they were rich because they had paper. Susan Roebuck,
For toilet paper.
toilet paper.
Big kettle.
Yes, yes. But they were kind to us. They really were. And then finally, moving around, they came to Akron because my grandmother stayed sick a lot. And for a while, they lived with us. And then they finally moved to Lod Street, I think it was, here in Akron. And they lived with a family on Lod Street. I can't remember their names. And my grandmother got sick. And my mother went to see her and my grandfather, and she really wasn't feeling that well that night when my mother left. And she came down the steps and she said, "I'll see you in the morning." They called us back and she had died. But nobody, my grandfather didn't realize. He knew that something was wrong, but that part didn't register with him. And my mother put a mirror to my grandmother's nose. That's what they used to do years ago, to see if she was breathing. She was not breathing. And I think with that and the funeral, that was like the turning point of my grandfather's world. Because my grandmother, she was the strong one. He was strong, but she was the strong one that kept him going. And when she died, that kind of did it for him. I think he just started going downhill. For us and my sister, he didn't communicate that much with us. With my mother, he did because she knew the history. And she was, at 8 years old, she was sworn to secrecy, not to say anything, while he got himself together to run. And that's what he did. My dad knew about it because my mother told him. But the rest of the family, she finally told these two later on in life.
Your grandmother did.
Yes.
One of the things that so many people remarked at yesterday at the service was a feeling that she was also there at the memorial.
That's the way, yes.
And I remember, Vanessa, when we did the interview in Atlanta in the fall, or in Lithonia, you talked about her quite a bit and about her visions and her dreams.
Yes.
Can you talk about what those mean to you?
I can relate because I have them. It's oh God. I feel that is I feel safe with them. And I'm sure that was God's way of communicating to her because she was open, her spirit was open to receive. And it was God's way of communicating to her that danger was approaching.
Yeah.
And a lot of my grandmother, which is her mother, used to tell me, "You have the same gift as my mom." And as a matter of fact, I feel honored that I have that has been passed on to me. So a lot of times I'll go to bed at night and I says, "Okay, God, give me a dream. Let me know if everything's okay." And I'm just so grateful and so honored that I have the same gift.
Her brother does too. He's got it too.
And just for the record, your great grandma's maiden name was Dorothy Adela Sanders.
Yes.
Mrs. Hurt, do you have any other memories of her? What kind of a woman she was? It sounds like she was really the foundation of the family, the backbone.
My grandmother?
Yes, ma'am.
She was for him. I think she was his guiding force there. And I think she came to him a lot after my grandmother died. She came to him. And I guess it was kind of to console him and let him know that she was okay. Because she often said, "Oh man, I'm okay. I'll be okay." She always called him "oh man." But she was strong. She was strong. She had my mother at an early age, okay? And with what she and Grandpa went through, she couldn't always keep my mother. So they would send, if they had another place to go or a place they had to hide or whatever, they would send her back down to Georgia.
Grandma ate them.
To my great-great-great-grandmother. And that was, her name was Grandma Adama. And she is the one who would take care of my mother. Because my grandmother and my grandfather were on the road running or something. So she took care of my mother. And she was more like a mother than her mother, because they weren't together. So she felt safe. She said, "I feel safe with Grandma Adama. She'd take care of me." So my mother she had a difficult time too. She had a difficult time. But she became strong out of this.
When did you hear the story about the Odyssey and the racial violence and the terror? When did you first become aware of that?
When I was little, I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know anything about it because I wasn't told. If I had been told that this happened to my grandfather, it would have been a different thing. But I was like 40. But I realized that before that, I realized that there was racial violence, okay? Even in Akron, Ohio. And most of the people that I had business with were all white people. There were no blacks. There were no, I was buyer for a department store. And all my friends were white. I was the only black buyer for a long time. And I still didn't connect quite. But it's in later years that I got out of my stupidity and learned what was really going on, you know?
Yes, ma'am.
So.
How did the story impact you as best as you can remember when you first heard it? What was your initial response? I'm going to ask each of you to kind of reflect in your own way.
When my mother told me about my grandfather?
Yes, ma'am.
Shocked. Saddened that he had to go through this. Worried that he was a loner in his loneliness, because he communicated with my mother, but like I said, he never communicated with my sister and I, or anybody else for that matter outside of my dad. And we could be sitting in the living room like this, And he'll come down and get dinner or whatever, or breakfast. And then he'd go back upstairs. He'd say good morning. And then the next time he'd come down, he'd say, Liz, how you doing? That's what everybody used to call me, Liz. How you doing? How is school? I said, it's okay, Grandpa. How you doing? I'm okay. That was it. He didn't communicate with children too well. And I don't think he communicated with adults too well either. But now I understand. I wish I could have known about him a little bit earlier. Because I just thought he was just a lonesome, kind of a strange person. I wish my mother had told me early. And I said to her, why did you tell me this early, Mama? She said, well, I promised. So she kept it until she couldn't keep it any longer. Because sometimes when you get sick, your whole thing changes about the secret that you're keeping. You want to let other people that you love know. And that's Marvin, this child, and her brother. She let know. And I was surprised. But she let them know. They knew.
Marvin, what was your response when you first found out?
When I first found out, it was in Atlanta. My brother and I, Ivan, my oldest brother, we went to my sister's wedding to be ushers in her wedding. And she got married. And so there were a lot of people in my sister's house bedding down and spending the night. So my aunt Melissa and I, we decided that we would just go to a hotel. We got our separate rooms, and we got up that morning and we went out. There was something like, if I recall, a gazebo or something I recall at this hotel. I think it's called the Quinta Hotel. And we just got into talking.
Yeah.
And that's what really started this thing off. And we really sat down and just really communicate together as relatives. And then she opened up and shared with me this story. And when she told me the story, I didn't want to doubt my grandmother, because I've heard many stories of such things as this. People running from the South to get free, or running from the Klansmen, or what have you. And of course, I took it to heart. But then as time went by, my grandmother passed on, and my sister and my baby brother, they began to look into it even furthermore, getting letters and getting bits of information. And then I really took it to heart. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a saying where you take it to heart, but even as it grew even more, then it made me even more convinced. Not that I doubted from the beginning when it was passed on to me, this information, but even more because the reality of it, that, you know, that even that you would come this far to do research and continue, you know. And so I can say I'm just amazed. I'm amazed at it, or speechless in some cases. But
yes,
this is, it is what it is.
And we appreciate you all.
Yes.
We really do.
We appreciate you sharing this with us and
This would never
allowing us to
come
be
to
part of
pass
this.
if it hadn't been for this child and her brother.
Right.
Then picked up with you guys. This is amazing.
I don't think it would have gone any farther at the stage that it was at from what we knew. But these two, they took it further, picked the ball up, I guess I'd say, and they saw the necessity of bringing it to the forefront.
We
Yes,
sat
sir.
up one night when they were here, you remember, and we went through all of the documents.
Right. And the amazing thing that she couldn't remember was, at the time, she was telling us and rehearsing it over again about the event of him and his running, and she said he had another name. She couldn't remember the name at the time. All she just knew was Lanier Johnson.
We were in the breezeway.
We were in the breezeway. And my sister went online. She had the laptop, and she was typing in, and then she began to read the document that was there in Florida about this incident that happened. And then it came up with the name Oscar Mack. And she said, "This is it. That's it."
Yeah.
She said, "That's it." And when she said that, she said, I feel chills in my body, because she couldn't remember the name, his birth given name.
Because you all knew him as Lanier Johnson.
Yes.
I didn't even know the name
Yes.
Lanier. I just knew him as Mr. Johnson, because my mother, like I said, took me. Only thing I remember of his existence was the day of his burial. That's all. I didn't know I had a step-grandfather. I don't mean to say step-grandfather, but
Right.
that was what my mother said. Well, that's your step-grandfather.
And the marker read Lanier Johnson.
Yes.
Vanessa, could you tell us what your initial, like when you first heard the story, how did it hit you?
I got angry. I got very angry.
And your grandmother told you the
My
story.
grandmother told my brother and I September of 2001. She said, "I have something to tell you." And
Were you here or in
we were here. She was in her bedroom. It's before she had her stroke. And she called me and Jim and said, "I have something to tell you. You were here." And we all went in, and she says, "I want to tell y'all something." And I thought, oh God. And when she told me about the reason why she was from home to home and why she married so young, because she got tired of running. And she told us that my great-grandfather's name was Oscar Mack, and that he had won a bid with to become a United Postal Worker employee, and he was a butcher for rural Bass. And what stuck in my mind was that he was a butcher. That he was a butcher. And then when the name came of Oscar Mack, that's when I said, that's right, it was Oscar. I remember Oscar, but I couldn't recall it until she did, and now everything started flooding back.
It was like the name came and I said, "That's it, that's him."
Yeah, because when you read it, you read the information on your laptop because you cued in on it. And when she said Oscar Mack, and she screamed, "That's it!"
But then the memories start coming flooding back. I can hear the conversation from my grandmother that it all came back, and butcher was the biggest thing that really stood out. I always remembered that he was a butcher.
So you're looking through the stuff, and you can't remember the name Oscar Mack.
No.
And so you go on your laptop.
Yeah,
what did you put in?
What I did, I just Googled black man killing Klansmen in Florida.
Okay.
That's what I put in there, and that's what populated.
Right.
And when that did, and I read it, I never forget it. It was like, oh my God, when she actually jumped up, and she needs assistance getting up, but she jumped up on her own.
So she's faking the rest of the time.
I'll get you later.
She jumped up, and we were like all of it. And my brother's wife was there. My Jim was a room where I will never forget that night. But to be honest with you, I am still angry. And I think it's because it was wrong. And some of the things that I have experienced in my own life.
Yes.
Recently losing a job that was unfair, the way it was done as a result of retaliation. So all of this I feel like will help heal. But then I look at him and I think, but you really had no life. But I do. You had no life because you lived in prison in the mind. And I refuse to live that way. So I have to turn my anger into love. So
I was thinking of at the memorial service yesterday and the beautiful benediction and
Yes.
but when we saw in the program the Lord's Prayer, Ms. Hurt, I have to be honest with you. When you went up, we thought you were going to recite the Lord's Prayer. And you sang.
It might have been better. If we
No.
recited it.
You did that.
You sang so beautifully, and I wonder what was going through your mind when you were singing the Lord's Prayer. And it's such a beautiful.
I've never heard it sung.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I think I was thinking, and it's weird. I wasn't thinking about him. I was thinking about my mother. And then at first I looked for her. I said, "You gonna be near?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "I'll get you in to the song." And I'm looking around to see you way over there somewhere.
I was next to you. I was on the other side of you.
Were you?
On the other side of the minister.
We were all wanting to be at our best. That's what it was.
Yeah,
So
but I
we
was
get edgy.
for some reason I was thinking
nervous.
about my mother. And then I sat there and I sat there and I said, "You're free. You're finally free. And you're finally home." After that, that's what went through my head. You're finally free and you're finally home.
And that was a big part of the service, was a new kind of emancipation in a
Yes.
way. That it seems like every one of you have said that.
Yes.
Freedom.
Yes.
But family members who couldn't be free because they're on the run from the Klan,
Yes.
and how that affects the family.
Yes.
And there's a sadness there, but there's also an incredible resilience
Yeah.
that we all of us who you welcomed into your family sense. That kind of power, the determination, the love, which you show to everyone. It's remarkable.
Yes. I saw in this story of my great-grandfather, although he was on the run, and I'm reminded of the biblical story of David. King David was on the run from King Saul. And David was constantly on the run. But what I did see in the story with David, God's hand was with him. And I'm reminded of Psalms 23, when we think of the Lord as my shepherd, I shall not want. And then he leads me in the pathway of righteousness for his name's sake. And then, yea, do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. So we're confronted with death, a brush of death. But I had to say that the Lord was with my grandfather, just like the Lord was with David. And that tells me there is a God
Yes.
that will guide us, protect us,
Yes.
and keep us. And I said in my prayer, not only for him, but Lord, you even protect the family, the extended family. And that would be us, because who knows, things could have been worse. We don't know.
Yes.
So that's what I saw from that biblical perspective,
Vanessa, when we did the first interview with you and your brother late last year, you were talking about how you want this story to be told, and a big theme was reconciliation, truth. Your brother mentioned that he wanted to emphasize the fact that racial oppression, white supremacy has harmed so many people, African Americans, Native Americans, women. How do you see this story as working in that way?
Well, I feel that it would be familiar to a lot of people. Nothing, especially to our culture, our race of people. It'll be another story, but however, the outcome that he survived, he made it, not the fact that he killed Klansmen in self-defense, but he got away for freedom. Mm-hmm. And to know that his message now is reconciliation. We got to move on. We have to move on. Let's bring in closure and healing, as I said before. And to know that that we're not trying to punish anyone or
Gloat.
Yeah, or to gloat, as he said, or to bring accolades in prideful, boastful way.
No.
But to say, this is how it damaged his life, where he couldn't live freely. He had to live in fear and hiding. Yes, we need, that part needs to be brought out, but also now that he's gone, he's in a better place. But for us that remain, we've got to make some changes. We have to change the way we think and the way we react to this type of behavior. Not saying that we're to crawl in a closet and say and become cowards, but our way of defending and fighting for what is right may have to change a bit. Mm-hmm. We have to look at the people that bring up, insult us or do mean things to us. We have to look at the fact that a lot of times it's their own fear, which is not excusable, but it's own fear, their own fear and selfishness. But I really feel that, as the title of the poem was, "The Bridge of Freedom to Love." To love.
Yes.
Once we work through that process, the grief, the anger, and all of that, the end result is we got to get to the love.
Yes.
Which a lot of us don't get to the love. We get stuck in the anger. The anger and retaliation.
That's
is where we
black
get
and
stuck.
white. We got to get to the love.
Yeah, that's right. All of us.
All of us together.
Together. Turn that into love.
Yes.
Turn that crisis into love.
And what you all are doing for him, it's going to turn people. And it's going to turn them in the right way. In love. It's going to turn them.
Well, he leaves
Really is.
behind a lovely family. And so that's, kind of the heritage that he left behind.
Yes.
And that and a lot of them have already suffered, because I do believe in karma. A lot of times, you don't have to do anything. I don't wish anything bad on anyone, because you already know that it comes back in full circle.
Yes.
What you put out there, whether it's good or bad, it comes back. And that's why I said we cannot get stuck in the anger and retaliation. Can't get stuck there. Because what you're doing, it's almost like that boomerang's coming around. You can't make it happen, not unless you do something illegal. And then there goes your life. But you're going to have to trust and move on. and then hope that that person learns something from what they've done.
I think it's going to be a change. I do. I think it's his life story is being told. We're going to be told. It's going to bring more people together than tear them apart. I believe that. I believe his life story is going to serve a purpose. And that's what it is, to bring people together. Because he was not a mean man. Never cursed. None of that. I never heard that from him. He was a mild man who had been persecuted, and he was still being persecuted when he thought he was free up here. So,
Mrs. Hurt, can you describe his final years as you remember them?
well, he was living on Bisson here, the street that goes this way, in a house. My mother got him into a house where there were a couple nurses living there.
Nurse facility.
Yeah, like a nurse's facility, and they took care of him. And my mother would go down there every day because we just lived around the corner. And one day, one of the ladies called and said to my mother, "Mrs. Hurt, do you know your father's in the street? Because normally they watch him. They'll walk him, but they won't let him out of the house." And she said, "No." She said, "Well, he's in the street and he's walking naked." I said, "Okay, I'll come down." Well, by that time he had what do you call it?
Dementia?
Yes. Yes.
Senility.
Yeah, just like I'm getting.
We would call it senility back in those days, but could have been Alzheimer's, who knows?
I think it was Alzheimer's.
We call them senile.
But you had mentioned, and maybe Vanessa at the interview, you felt also that in addition to that, he was really a troubled soul.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
He was troubled. I think he just went into deep depression. He was already depressed after he had to live in secrecy, that he could not have the normal life. And they were always guarded because they never know when they had to leave, because there were times they left in the middle of the night when she had those dreams. I mean, so they were on the run. So I really feel that played a big part in, and then the death of his of my grandmother, great grandmother, that really
That kind of
took him over the
sealed
deep
it,
end.
yeah.
Yeah.
Vanessa, I want to go back to the dreams. And you talked about you having a gift for the dreams, and that your great grandma, you feel like that was passed down to you. But could you go back and think about the dreams that she had, what you knew about them, or what we might have to kind of guess, to think about what kinds of dreams she had that saved them as they were moving?
She probably, in the dreams, felt the fear, okay, because you can actually feel what's happening in a dream. And I feel like she could hear running. That she could hear running, maybe some horses. And it's dark. And there's like a kind of bunch of sticks, like under, like small trees. Like they're coming. You know how you're running through something, a forest, and you hear the cracking of the limbs. And she would hear this and know that she would be overwhelmed with fear. And she says, "It's time to go." Or there may be somebody that they've communicated with and they thought that they, were friendly. And then she may have a dream about snakes. Snakes, a lot of times when we dream about snakes, is an indication of an enemy. Or you may dream about an animal. I have had dreams about petting the dog and then he bites me. That means enemy. Or she may have actually seen the person and says, they're coming after us. Because I've had dreams where I've actually seen the person. I've had dreams where there actually were, it was full detail of the dream. And I woke up and maybe a couple of days later, the same thing happened that was in the dream. So I'm sure that it was precise.
Yeah.
And then if it wasn't, she was able to get an interpretation.
And she would have a dream, and she would tell her husband, "It's time to move."
Time to
To go.
And he respected that because he relied on her dreams.
Once in a while, he'd have a dream too, but it wasn't as strong as hers.
How many times, we probably will never know for certain, but how many times would you guess they had to move because of fleeing for their lives?
Oh, I'd say sometimes every 6 months. And sometimes, like in New Jersey, they stayed there the longest. But they were in Youngstown, they were in Connecticut, they were all over. But also, they were also with the people that they worked for. Because he was a chauffeur and she was a cook. With people that they worked for. Yeah. My grandmother was a good cook. She could make something out of nothing. She was good.
My grandma was a good cook too.
Mama had to learn though.
But when the time,
Daddy said all she could make was lemon pie.
yeah, but by the time when we came into the
Yeah.
picture,
Oh
Grandma
yeah,
could
oh
cook.
Lord,
she
yes.
could cook.
Yes, she could. Yes, she could.
Now about the lemon pie, I don't know about that. She could cook, and
Dad used to tease her.
that
When I
reminded
first
me,
married you, you couldn't cook. You made lemon pies.
it's about as bad as
He had to go
Deborah-
over to his mother to eat, and she couldn't cook worth a quarter.
It's about as bad as Deborah Barone making lemon chicken for Raymond Barone.
Oh, I remember that.
Yes.
Remember that?
That was funny.
Well, this is kind of like that.
But like I said, by the time I came, Grandma could cook.
Yes, yes, she could.
Did you know this grandmother in Georgia?
Yes.
Me?
Hip. No, auntie.
Okay.
Oh, my mother's mother?
Yeah.
Yeah. Grandma Dale?
No, she's talking about Grandma Adama.
Oh, Grandma Adama?
Yeah.
I never met her.
Edelman is the name.
I'm sorry?
How do you spell that last name? Or how do you...
I always called her Grandma Adama.
But Zayden.
But you gotta remember, in the South, they may have been spelled correctly, but they may use the words more a little,
Right.
you know, which is,
And in one of those pictures, the lady with the hat on, with her head bent, that's Grandma Adama. That's all I knew to call her.
When this happened, when Oscar Mack initially faced down the Klan and defended himself, have you thought about how that story relates to Black history in general? Have you shared the story with other families?
No.
And so you've kept it really... So I guess my next
I
question...
really don't care who in the family knows. This is my family right here,
Yes, ma'am.
okay? And Jimmy. So I don't have that much of a family. Because all my family, my age, aunts, uncles, their children are all dead. I'm the only one living. I'm the only one living. Now, they have children, you know, but I don't know them like I knew their brothers and sisters.
How would you like this story shared, taught to young people, taught this to the society in general? What are the main themes, the main points that you want expressed?
It's a good question, but one of the things I thought about would be something that would be good in the time of Black History Month. You know, there are things that come on up during Black History Month. What's in February? Yes, in February. Of course, there are a lot of things that were shared on PBS in Black History Month that people we didn't know that existed, or musicians, or freedom riders, or what have you, that they were able to bring to the forefront that we didn't know anything about. I thought that this would be something would be good, like you said, not for revenge or gloating, but someone who made it in a sense to freedom
And
from
they
death.
could overcome.
You know, and did overcome, even
Yes.
though he lived the remainder of his life.
But he
introvert,
escaped from there.
But escaped from death.
Yes.
Escape from death. I think that would be something would be appropriate for Black History Month, or any other means of
Any
media
other month.
way of getting it across.
Yeah.
If not a book, but the Black History Month would be, I think, would be good.
And just, especially for our young people, young men and women, black and white,
Yes.
because it comes in different forms,
Yes.
discrimination. How to cope with it. Not to get stuck, because it still exists. It's just done a little differently. And how do you deal with that? How do you overcome that? Using your head. Using your head. When you go in, not to be caught by surprise, like I have. Start teaching your children young. Not to say, well, they're bad, they do this, they do that. Not to be identified as,
A victim.
yeah, the victim,
Always.
but the overcomer, the survivor.
Yes.
And not get caught up in the fact, well, they're picking on me, But how do you overcome? What tools can we use?
Besides a gun.
Yes, besides violence. How do you overcome that? So that you go on with your daily life. It's just like when you know someone doesn't like you, I could appreciate that. I could appreciate that. I know you don't like me,
Right.
but it's not going to stop me, and I'm not going to allow that to defeat me. So we have to teach our children that. You already know. I'd rather for you to be upfront with me than to do this behind my back, which I see a lot of that. You see a lot of that, and then you get in, and next thing you know, they're giving you a hard time. Or trying to take what you have that you worked hard for. So we have to teach our children how to overcome that and keep moving, because they're obstacles. Now, but when it comes life-threatening, it's a different thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But this exists.
Because everything you've told me about Oscar Mack and Adele and their story, they refuse to be victims.
Exactly.
One of-
Exactly.
One of the things Julian said yesterday is that Oscar Mack defied the hatred they targeted at him by living. I just loved how that
Yes.
sounded.
You know, and not only that, but when I look at my grandmother, her mother, which is my grandmother, and my grandfather, they came up during the era particularly where it was discrimination, even up here. But they refused to be victims of it. to the point where, you know, they went on and made a living. They worked hard. And if they can make it, truly our generation and the generation that's younger people and the ones to come can make it too, because they have opportunity now to get an education,
Yeah.
to learn more, to read. There was a time when it was against the rule for a black person to read, because they knew if they read, they would get further ahead, and plus there was punishment. So there's no excuse for our young people not to grasp hold of education. I don't care who you are. Even President Obama, he was an intelligent man, he refused, but in spite of, yes, because of his skin color, they still make no difference who you are, they're still going to try to throw obstacles at you. But you have to make up in your mind
Yeah.
Exactly.
to go forward. And our young people have every opportunity to go forward instead of looking at being a victim. I'm a victim all the time. Don't use that excuse. We all are victims in some case or another, but we go forward on. And with the help of the Lord, we can. You know, I just believe that. So I think Oscar Mack was a good example for our family, that in spite of how the outcome may have come before his demise, that he might have been poor or whatever it was, but he was determined to go on and live.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that's to go back and rehash over and glean from, and to pick out those things that were positive in spite of.
Right.
Yes.
Well, and one of the things you mentioned, I'm just thinking about this. I mean, looking over his letters, Oscar Mack and Adele, the correspondence they have between them.
Yes.
Right.
Beautiful penmanship,
Yes.
tremendous attention to detail, budgeting,
Yes.
insurance, being a member of a fraternal organization, owning a car in the 1920s,
Yeah.
Right.
which was very rare.
Right.
1927, a car.
Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
there's still a lot of people with horse and buggy.
Yes.
If they didn't have a buggy, at least they had a horse.
And you know, and he came from a family, seemed like they were hardworking people, and they had, you know, the essentials in life. But I think with Oscar going to France to serve in the France theater, they mentioned that the people treated, and I hear that a lot, that you were treated better than your own country.
Yeah.
Oh, I heard that
So-
and
Entertainers,
Oh,
black
yeah.
entertainers.
And so with him being exposed to that, and he come back to America with that same mindset, forgetting that you're not in France anymore. So when he boldly bidded for the U.S. Postal job, I think he forgot where he was, but he felt probably more freer
yeah.
when he came back.
He had every expectation.
Yes,
He had fought for his country. He had fought to liberate Europe.
yes,
So he should have been able to do those things.
yes, yes.
And I was thinking, I want to ask a couple of questions about World War I, but before I forget, bidding on that postal route, that wasn't just like being a letter carrier. I know this because I'm in a retired postal service family. My wife delivered the mail for
Okay.
25 years. She actually helped our son bid on a rural route. That's like being a contractor, and you have to you have to place a bid. You have to give a budget. You have to, you have to write a contract, which is going to, and then other people compete against you for that bid. Now he wins the bid in 1922.
21, 22.
22, yeah. So, but by him winning that bid, there are other people competing for that because that's money beyond what you would make normally as a letter carrier.
Yes.
So, and he might have people working for him furthermore. And you think about who those people might be.
Yes. And chances are they might have been of the race, and then represented the fact that a black man is over them, possibly. You know.
Yes, I mean, he's going to be a senior employee. Well, the other question I had was about his name. And I know when we've talked about this, one of the things that I think that you shared with me was that Lanier Johnson is a name you feel like he may have heard, at least Lanier, that part
In France.
during the Great War.
Yes.
Can you just tell me that story again so we make sure we have it on?
Well, you know, when I asked Aunt Melissa, I said, what was his name again? She says, Lanier. And I said, that sounds French. And I said, I bet you he either knew someone named Lanier over there, or he just took that name and says, you know what? That'll keep me safe using Lanier, because rarely you hear of a black person named Lanier.
No.
So that way, Johnson was kind of, you know, common name,
That's common.
but Lanier, he probably
It kind of threw it off balance,
it
didn't it?
did. And I thought, you're not sure it's not Lane or
Or Harry or something.
well, Leonard?
Yeah.
Was it Leonard?
Yeah.
And she says Lanier. So
Well, you said his nickname was Lonnie.
Lonnie.
We see that in the Mason booklet.
Yes, yes. And so I feel that using the word Lonnie, maybe they nicknamed him Lonnie, that he didn't come up with that. They probably looked at him and says, you don't look like a Lanier, let's just call you Lonnie, you know, or something of that nature. Or
And it seems like he practiced you see his signature over and over again. And it seems, you know, he may have been practicing because to assume another identity in order to keep his family safe, he has to keep on reminding himself.
That name.
Yes. I mean, how challenging. But you see that in the documents over and over again. He's practicing Lanier Johnson.
Yes, he
The
is.
L is very distinctive. I've never seen an L
Yeah.
so. I mean, it's beautifully written.
Hey, honey.
yeah, it was very, very much. It's like I said, almost like it's practicing to keep them, and also maybe to keep them from tracking, because you know, because his draft records had his signature as well, so he maybe did not want them to pick up his handwriting, because it almost looked like it changed a little bit from Oscar, his on his draft record for safety. I really feel like that he and great grandma were very cautious, and I mean they were smart. I mean, covering their tracks to make sure no one got any clues of them.
And I'm sure that they also were a little bit leery of strangers. If they figured that they thought they knew them or something, knew one of them or something, they'd be ready to go again.
Yeah, and not only that, you had mentioned that they watched her after the night of the shootings when he escaped. They kept an eye out.
Yes, they did.
The Klan did. Because they were looking for him, and the newspapers say there were 50 carloads.
Half 100.
Yeah,
It's 200
Klansmen or
fled.
white supremacists, and so they were looking at her, at Adela, to try to get clues as where to waylay him.
Yeah.
Yeah, the amazing thing about it is, in the back of my mind, it's just amazing they didn't do anything to her.
That has crossed my mind a lot. Why didn't they try to?
Because it could be, I'm just guessing now, is she's the key to finding him.
Okay.
They wanted him
We
alive.
wanted him alive.
And they figured wherever she was going to leave, you know, right away. But then she had Mama with her. My mother was down there too. And that's when Grandma explained to her that I'm swearing you to secrecy here. You can't tell anybody. And my mother dragged that out until she married my dad, and she told my dad, but nobody else.
The Klan that, and we know this, you know, thanks to the research that Curtis Michelson and Julian Chambliss did, the Klan in Orlando, in Osceola County, they were of a sort, if I could describe them, because I've done research on them, not the Oscar Mack case, but prior. They were of a special kind of vengeful, very. So let me give you one example. This is not an edifying story. So after the Election Day massacre of 1920, and we think that some of the same men that assaulted Oscar Mack were involved in the Election Day massacre in 1920, where African Americans in Ocoee, which is not far from Kissimmee, tried to vote. When they drove the people, I mean, they killed many people, but when they drove them out of that community, the following day, the following week, they had to leave with all their possessions. And the descriptions we have are of Klansmen and white people lining on either side of the road, cheering as the black families were forced out of this community. That's the kind of people that Oscar Mack and Adele were dealing with. These were angry, spiteful people.
Yes.
And anytime African Americans did anything to try to get an education, to try to improve themselves, to try to make a good living, these white people were there to stop them.
Suppress.
Yes. They want you as their cook and chauffeur or whatever,
Yeah.
or babysitter. They trusted their kids to us.
Even to the point, I'm told, to even breastfeed them from the black maid.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, the blacks raised their children all through slavery. That's why you get that southern accent, because it's that West African accent mixed with the British accent in the South.
Yes.
The southern accent.
Their diet is the same as blacks down south, pretty much back then. I don't know what it is now, but their diet,
They
their
claim all that as their own.
food menu was about the same. You know,
Because they had a black cook. What do you want?
If you could talk to those men now, what would you say to them?
these men, I don't believe there's anything I could say to them if they're in that same mode of thinking, you know, because we have to realize that that hatred was ingrained in them from generation to generation, passed down to them. You know, what could you say to them? Only thing I could say that would only help them, it would have to be God that would change their hearts, just like He changed anybody else's heart, whether black or white, whatever race we are. It would take the power of God to change that individual heart, and God has changed some of them, their hearts. It's only God can do that.
But God has
You know.
changed some of our hearts too.
Exactly. So it would take God to do that.
Yeah.
And touch that heart of that individual. Now there are some who have came forward and denounced the Klansmen or white supremacists, period, and by their own reasoning. But there are some that who is so ingrained, and a lot of them that are ingrained believe that they're doing God's will. They believe that they really are doing God's will. They involve the burning cross, you know. What could I say to them? I don't know. It would take God to lead me to say the right thing.
Exactly. Because they still exist. So I don't have to go back. If I need to say anything,
They're here.
they're still here.
Your president knows they're around too.
Yeah, they're still here. I mean, so what can I say? Basically, the truth is the truth. You know, this was a selfish, very mean thing that you did. But the biggest thing, he lived.
Yes.
He lived.
Another name that was mentioned at the memorial yesterday on several occasions was C.C. Collins. And I'm looking at the program and the biography of Oscar Mack, and it says that after Mack was threatened, a white postmaster that worked with him named C.C. Collins gave Mack a revolver to protect himself because the postmaster knew that these men were going to try and hurt Mack.
I heard that story, yes.
What does that part of the story mean to you?
A lot. It
And
means a lot.
this means that a white person helped to save my grandfather.
Yes. Yeah, just like my
That
baby,
means a lot.
just like my baby brother pointed out yesterday when you and I, we were all discussing in the round table outside, that it wasn't all just blacks, but it was whites that were involved in helping blacks. I'm told the Underground Railroad was a part of white involved in that.
I think they helped him.
And some that even to getting some to Canada. Even Martin Luther King, that were whites in the background that helped with his march and organize and everything, and possibly financially. So, you know,
We couldn't
I
have
would
done this
say-
alone.
right, we
No
need
way.
help. And even with Martin Luther King, it brought a lot of race together,
Yes,
you know, for equality, you know,
yes.
things like that. So I would, if I was going to put C.C. Collins, I would put him in that category because he knew that was the only protection that Oscar Mack had going for him. And there was nothing was going to stop those men from coming out there and doing what they were going to do. You know, so I think the Constitution says we have a right to bear arms. Personally, I probably wouldn't bear one in my house, but I wouldn't go against a person who desired to protect their home to bear arms. You know, not looking for trouble, but to bear arms to protect his family. You know.
The only rifle that I have in this house belongs to Oscar Mack.
Yeah.
He gave it to my dad before he died. Give it your name.
C.C. Collins risked his life. Basically, he risked his life,
Yes,
which to me describes the character of a good man.
yes.
To risk your life back then for a black man?
Because they would hang him on the same tree.
Yes.
Exactly. So that I have a lot of questions about him. I would love to know what kind of person he really, really was. What made you do that? Were you tired of seeing this with other people being treated like this? Were you fond of my great-grandfather? Were you friends with him?
Because
Who are you?
he left, C.C. Collins left
He left.
to shortly after the incident.
Right, and the federal agent that was involved.
Agent Howe.
Yes. Those two men stick out. What did you know about my great-grandfather? And what relationship? He was known he was a good man. To do this. And I feel like that they had something to do with him.
In surviving all of
Surviving.
this. Yes.
I just believe God would put people in your way to get you where you need to go.
Yes,
I just believe that.
I
just
believe it too,
that's-
Marvin.
I just believe that's just the hand of God involved in moving upon people, putting right people in position, in key positions. That was a key position. To someone else, it may not mean anything, but that was a key position to as far as I'm concerned.
It means something to us.
You know,
Yes.
How do you feel the spirit of Adela and Oscar Mack coming down through the family and manifesting itself now?
Well, you look at a picture of her. When I went upstairs, I was looking through my grandmother's pictures, and I went upstairs and I saw this picture and I said, when did I dress up like this? I was like, gosh, because you know how they have when you dress up in those older clothes. And I was like, when did I do this? And I said, oh my God. And I looked at the back, I said, this is not me. So I ran downstairs, I said, Grandma, who is this looking like me? And she started chuckling. She says, child, that's your great grandmother. That's my mother. I've been telling you for years, you look just like her and you act like her.
Wow.
So I feel like her spirit is with me. And now that I am researching and all of this with Jim and everything, and I've been asking Aunt Melissa a bunch of questions.
Honey, I can't remember half of it. They remember a lot.
And I have her picture next to me on my bedside, and my friends, when I show it to them, they go, oh my God, is that you? My cousins were freaking out. They all thought it was me dressed up. But it's like, gosh, I feel so special that I'm part of her.
Yes.
That I'm part of her, and I've got the dreams and her look like her, especially when I was younger. So
You still look like her. You still look like her.
I also see too that there's a strength from the stories that I hear from great grandma Dale. She was a strong woman. And I just believe there had to be a strong woman in this picture, in this life of Oscar Mack. And that strength, I believe, trickled down to my grandmother, which was my grandma Dale's daughter, Florida Mae Hurt,
Oh, yeah.
had the strength.
Mama had the strength she
It
did.
trickled down to my mother. And then I have a daughter that's 45 years old. I better get that age right. But I see that strength in her, that same strength. A strong woman.
Yeah.
You know, there's no sense of being strong where there's no oppositions. When there's, because the absence of strength is the presence of weakness. So if you look at it that. So I saw it as that strength that they had.
My
That's
mother
what I
worked in
saw.
the union.
And yes.
At that time, there were no black women working in the union.
What did she do in the union?
She was like the secretary. My mother learned to type. She had to learn to type because she was writing out stuff. And it was much easier for her to do the typing. She went and got a typewriter, and she learned herself to type. She worked for the working man and woman in Goodrich.
She was a leader in the Teamsters Union,
Yeah, because she would go on the trips and all of that stuff. Yeah. But she made it on her own. She did it on her own, and they didn't help her too much.
She wasn't afraid to speak up.
No, and then
or stand
one
against opposition.
Yes, and then one time something happened and they walked her out of the building,
Goodrich.
Yes.
and she walked back in the next day.
With her head held high.
Yes, and her union members and friends. Yeah, that was my mother. She got it from her mother.
Yes.
Yes.
So in spite of all that, what they went through with was not good. But then something came out of it.
Yes. Yes, it did.
Strength.
Yep. Yep.
You look at it like that. There's, I guess I'm always referring to scripture because I'm a minister. But I saw the scripture and reminded of that we know that all things work together for the good to those who are called to his purpose. It worked for the good. All the things that they encountered did not necessarily feel good, but it worked out for the good. What can you get from it? They were strength, they were strong.
Yes.
What do we get from when we are faced with opposition, with racism, and we go on in spite of, and God helps us through it? We're made strong against opposition. We know that we can do all things through Christ Jesus that strengthens us. So I guess I'm looking at it from that spiritual standpoint, because by being a minister, and it's just amazing. That's all.
We would like to do follow-up interviews in the future, but for now, and Venetia, do you have other questions?
No, I want to try to hunt down some of these people. C.C. Collins and I'm going to look up the Masonic archive for her. Stuart Hamilton, I found his death, but I was still looking for this other guy.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so we need to look for this. But no, I don't have any more questions. I was really interested in how you found him on the computer, but you explained that. So that was kind of cool. Were you here when she was looking up on the computer?
Yes, I was. Whenever my brother and sister come in town, we take time out to be with them. And it was one of these nights, and we get together over here. This is the meeting place for family. And we were just, I don't know whether we did a cookout, but we just stayed up. We always do a cookout. Somebody's going to eat something just like this now. And every holiday we're doing something. But to make a long story short, we got on this subject.
It was Jim that initiated.
Jim, because my baby brother is big on family
history.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
I thought I loved history, but and then particularly he has a certain history that he likes. I'm pretty sure I do too. But his main thing was family history and family heirloom or whatever, you know. So he got on it, and then one thing led to another. And then my sister, she had a laptop and she typed in a lynching in Florida, and it led her to this, and this what really opened the, I won't say open a can of worms, but
Floodgates.
Opened the floodgate. Opened the floodgate and got the ball rolling.
Well, I knew
And I didn't think it was going to get like this. I really
Klansmen
didn't.
to get killed by black men, so I knew it was like, I knew it was a rare thing. So I said, we're going to start.
Well, it wasn't so much, it was a rare thing, Klansmen get killed, and then the person gets away, escape.
Yeah.
That's what really, and so it just.
That's the story you never hear.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't.
And then what you've done is that you've allowed us to find out what happens after. And so you're living prefect of his life. Yeah.
And my aunt has been so patient. We call her, especially with Jim, because he loves to keep her thinking. So he'll call her, Melissa, because we're always like that night we were all sitting in a breezeway. He goes, Melissa, what was the name, the real name of Lanier Johnson's, what was his real name? And so that's what sparked the whole thing. The whole room went silent, and she was thinking, so I said, not Google. So it's him. We had to thank Jim.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have the name of his stepbrother and his brother.
Yes.
So maybe we'll be able to track down some family.
Charles Moore, stepbrother, and William Mack Jr.
Yeah.
William Mack.
So that'd be fun.
Those are good clues.
Yeah.
I
Definitely.
don't know if they're still in Kissimmee, but
Okay.
Kissimmee, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So the question is, usually I'm saying that for I'm asking the question of what she said. I don't know whether he's in Kissimmee or not. Usually they say where you're born at, you don't go far from that for the most part.
Or far, far
geographically,
away. Yeah.
Right.
not far away. I told you know.
It is a tough town, Kissimmee, Florida, and I say that I did a teacher's workshop there a few years ago, and I was asked by the school district, the superintendent of the school district, to come down and do a workshop with the teachers on oral history. And I always start by asking, well, what questions would you ask of your students to go out and talk to elders? And so one of the older teachers said, well, I would ask them to ask about the bell that would ring at 5 p.m. every day. And the whole room went silent. And I said, oh, the bell? What bell? You know, I was curious. Very uncomfortable silence in the room. And then one of the teacher that said this said, well, you know, we had a bell that rang for many years at 5 p.m. And when it rang, all the Negroes had to leave the city limits.
Oh my goodness.
Unless they were in service, which of course meant being a domestic worker in a house. So Kissimmee was that kind of town. It was a Jim Crow town, and it was interesting. The older teacher acknowledged this, but everyone else kind of was like, "Oh, don't talk about that." These are predominantly white individuals. So it was a real interesting.
Did they give a reason why they had to leave by 5, or was it something that the white man rang or the black man rang?
No, probably.
It was the white power structure, and what we know, I don't know specifically about. What I know about Kissimmee is that it was settled by Northerners in the 1870s, 1880s, primarily former Union Army veterans. It was what we call a Grand Army of the Republic town. And so a lot of Union Army members, they had their big veterans organization back then was called the Grand Army of the Republic. And it was the largest fraternal organization in the history of this country. And they would actually settle, a lot of them would settle towns of former veterans in the Midwest or out west or in the South. So Kissimmee was one of those Florida Grand Army of the Republic towns. Now, a lot of towns, we call them sundown towns because this was a very common practice, not only in the South, but in the Midwest and out west. African Americans had to leave the city limits by a certain time, usually when the sun went down.
Not in my state, because in my state we outlawed blacks. We didn't enforce it, but the Oregon Territory, all that, you weren't allowed to go in if you were black.
Where was this?
In the Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, originally they had laws where you couldn't go in if you were black.
Okay.
And then even when the state comes in, Washington State comes in, you can't go in. But one of our big founders happens to be a freedman who's black. And the reason why they let him in, he was with his white friends, and they all had a lot of money.
Okay.
And so they let him come. Sold in Tumwater.
Yeah. George Washington Bush.
George Washington Bush.
Right. He had saved some white people, and so they were very grateful, but that's what you had to do. But those towns, there's a book by James Lowen. It's very interesting. I know Jim would love to read it. It's called Sundown Towns, and it gives you a general history of that kind of town. But that's what I knew about Kissimmee, and I tried to follow up with that question, and people were kind of like little.
Still cannot speak of that. Oh, wow.
So that was what Oscar Mack was dealing with in the 1920s.
Yeah.
Well, as we kind of wrap up, because we've taken up a lot of your time, I really appreciate it. Are there any questions or thoughts that you'd like to share that we haven't talked about?
I have a question. Now that we've come this far with this project and this story, where will we go with it from here? I guess that's the question I'm asking.
That's an excellent question. And I think when we talked to Jim on the phone with Curtis and Julian, we asked the same question. You know, what does your family, like what steps forward do you want to take? Sometimes families will prefer that a story remains
Within the family.
within the family. It sounds like your family wants this story to be told and shared.
Yes.
And so what we would like to do, and these are just ideas, because I'm a teacher and I'm teaching, a history course in the fall, I would like to start sharing the story with my students. So that would just be one of many ways. And of course that's kind of limited because I'll have, 35 or 40 students. But it is, that's one possible audience.
Okay.
And then another possibility with, thanks to Deborah, is a documentary of some kind. Now, we're not Ken Burns, you understand. But Deborah Hendricks is a pretty darn good videographer and documentarian. So that's another thing that we
No
could.
wonder I like her.
She's great. Yeah, so that's another thing. Another possible outcome is podcasts. And so these are like audio, they play on radio stations. We have a radio station that takes our material. It's kind of limited to 2 counties in Florida. So we can put it out there, but then we also have a podcast series on iTunes. And if you have kids, they're probably in iTunes. I mean, I'm on iTunes. And when our podcasts go out, and these are 8 to 10 minute kind of mini documentaries, the audience there is very large.
I mean, the media now, the media is so besides TV, the media waves is much greater now.
It is.
Because things go viral or, however you want to look at it. Just the ways of media now is just, it's awesome.
Yeah, it is. And then, the traditional ways, writing, I think, all this material, you may decide, Jim may decide, and you may decide collectively as a family to write kind of a memoir, like a family memoir about, because this is very unconventional. I mean, Oscar Mack and Adele are, obviously they're not here, but at the same time, so much of the story and how it manifests itself in in our generation now. So we could collaborate on articles. There could be a book in the future. I don't know. I mean, I would think that you would drive that project. So I can just let you know that we're with you.
The three of them could handle it.
Okay.
They could handle it.
Okay, I did have a question.
They could handle it. Yes, you could. I know they could.
So, Auntie, you said that your mother was sworn to secrecy
Yes, when
at
she
8
was
years old? 8 years old? Okay. And that's Dorothy.
Yes.
No,
My
her
mother,
mother-
Florida.
That's Florida. Okay.
Yes.
So, do you know when she left Florida? When Florida left Florida? Or when she was born?
She was born in 1913.
Oh,
Is that why she was named Florida, because of living in Florida?
I don't know.
okay. So Florida was born in 1913.
Florida May Hurt.
Yeah, Grandma Dale named her, so.
I'm just
Everything
wondering,
went down in 1920.
was she born in Florida? Was Grandma born in Florida? Your mom?
You got me. I think she was
In
from
Macon.
Georgia.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I thought of Florida is out of it.
Because that's where her grandmother was,
Okay.
in Macon, Georgia.
So she's 9 years old when everything went down.
Yeah, about 8 or 9.
And so they told her right away, before she moved, she knew what was going on.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
her mother told her.
When I spoke with Curtis and Julian last night before they left, they were also mentioning, because we're thinking about how the story can be shared, and there's an organization called the Equal Justice Initiative. They're based in Montgomery, Alabama. They're led by a lawyer by the name of Brian Stevenson. He's one of the most amazing legal minds of our time. And the Equal Justice Initiative, or EJI, is actually building, even as we speak, a museum and a memorial to the victims of lynching. They're building that in Montgomery. However, they're creating regional memorials and markers all over the South.
Okay.
And so one of the locations for a marker in Florida is western Orange County, not very far from Kissimmee. That memorial will be dedicated to the victims and survivors of the Ocoee election massacre of 1920. My understanding is that Curtis has taught, now Curtis is part of that effort in Orange County because he lives down there by Orlando.
Okay.
And my understanding is that he has shared the Oscar Mack story with the EJI people and that they are very interested in the story. Now what they do with it, I don't know, but that's something we can follow up because EJI is one of they're a powerhouse organization. Their goal is to eventually abolish the death penalty in the United States.
Wow.
And Brian Stevenson, again, he does the TED Talks, and it's like 100,000 people will listen, So, again, I couldn't make any promises, but my understanding from Curtis again is that EJI is very interested in this story, and that would fit very well into their educational, because they put out a lot of education material about lynching. However, they don't have this kind of a story. So.
Yeah, I definitely think, to me, it has to be used for education. I think it's whether you're looking at the value of oral history, as I've said before, the value of so often as historians we look at what we call primary resources, which are newspapers, the original newspaper, but here's where the newspaper got it wrong. And the newspaper is balanced against family. And then there's the whole aspect of how a family continues their traditions and their oral histories that are passed among family members. That's a beautiful thing there. So there's a lot of aspects of this that can be used for education. Yeah, social memory.
We were just wrapping up and we were talking about, kind of next steps. Where do we go from here? And don't they look really comfortable? And
Once we got her seated and situated.
That should have been filmed.
No, I don't think
The
so.
bloopers, huh?
Yes, that was excellent. Do you
The
want to look back
outtakes.
on that? Have that extra few minutes?
Well, it's been fun. It's been a memorable day from the time
2
that you
days,
all
yes.
came here. It was really nice. It really made our day.
Yes.
Yes.
Like I said
Thank
before,
you.
we were happy we were able to accommodate you all, feed you all.
You tell me the things that I didn't know. That I really didn't know.
Well, none of us, that's why we love history, because none of us has the whole story. We have little bits and
So we
pieces.
connect the dots.
Yes, the puzzles together.
The puzzle, the bigger picture.
And I was never good at those puzzles. You'd have them on the table, and I'd be like,
Well, especially those jigsaw puzzles. Gee whiz.
My mother made us do them.
Yes.
Yeah, that was how she kept us busy. That, or she'd give us a newspaper and have us color in all the O's.
I preferred chores. I preferred chores to jigsaw puzzles because I'd be like, I'll go chop wood instead.
She knew how to keep you out of her hair.
That's right. Get down and color all
Judge, we found a book that was, we think it was coded, that he developed his own vocabulary that was basically codes, if you will. The KKK is in there and different words that he used probably to communicate,
And they each had a number.
Okay, yeah, I saw that book. I was kind of looking through that.
yeah.
And that's James
Oh, gosh.
Brown
I've got
speaking
chills.
off camera.
I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, he can be on camera.
I just wanted to identify
over
you.
here.
And Crystal Dixon has come in the room. She's another interviewer with Spock.
And also, I think that Marvin, because of his faith, I think he would like this. It says that Lanier Johnson was baptized, did you know this, Melissa, on Sunday night, May 10th, 1931, in Akron, Ohio. It says here that he received the Holy Ghost on Saturday, May 16th.
Where?
Jesus only.
Jesus only? Okay.
Yeah, but
Well, then, you know, if it was Jesus only, I remember First Apostolic Faith Church, before Bishop Francis Smith had became pastor, he came from Columbus to a church, and it was, one of the churches was called Jesus Only, and it was somewhere in South Akron. I don't know whether it was on Miami Street or whether it was in a home, because they started out in a house. It was called Jesus Only. Then that church was supposed to have been First Apostolic. Then it moved up on Bellows. The documented history would be in the First Apostolic Archive,
Okay.
Debbie. So it may be in the First Apostolic Archives, which is somewhere in South Africa. Then when Bishop Smith came from Columbus as pastor, he changed it to God is Love Church. And then later on, he changed it to First Apostolic Faith Church. And it was used to be at your church, where you used to be sitting there on the corner of Euclid and Raymond.
Yes.
And then they later moved from Euclid and Raymond to Easter Avenue, where it presently resides now. So when you said Jesus only in there, then we had to trace back. I remember in the archive church history that First App had started somewhere with that name, Jesus Only.
Wow.
Comes up on Google there.
Does it? Okay, does it say where its location is?
So according to this document, it looks like Oscar Mack was baptized at this church,
Jesus Only Church.
Jesus Only.
Jesus Only Church.
Right.
Yes.
In 1960, now I know on the church, First App, it started out in on the Rock. They have it founded in 1962, I believe, or 61, 62. But then again, we have to trace back, and like I said, there's in the church archive that it originally, before other pastors came and Francis Smith took it to another level, it was called Jesus Only. I don't know whether the people nicknamed it that or the people of the church called it Jesus Only.
Okay.
Okay.
On Easter Avenue?
On Easter Avenue?
790 Easter Avenue?
Yeah, 790 Easter Avenue. That's First Apostolic Faith. But you would have to, I don't know whether Google would take you back as far back during the time when Lanier Johnson was there. It could have been, only way we probably could find it would be in the First Apostolic Church archives.
Archives, yeah. Jim, I want to take advantage of the fact that you have just spent almost 2 hours with Crystal going through these documents.
yes.
What do you find? What are your thoughts about going through the documents Oscar Mack and your great grandmother left behind?
Well, I think now it has become really, really personal to me. It's almost like I knew this guy. I've somehow been able to align myself with his memory and understanding that he was a smart man, that he was, he had a very strong constitution in spite of what he had to endure. Became very personal to me, the letters, the hard work that he had to endure. I mean, working at the aerospace center, becoming a butcher. I mean, this man had, many thoughts, many ideas that he acted out, that he played out in spite of his history. I have a great respect for him now, because now it's personal, a great admiration for him. I'm glad that we were able to research him, which is now adding or enriching my life. The the same for my great grandma. Very strong woman. Insurmountable odds. Sort of reminds me of my sister Vanessa. Just a very strong woman with great capabilities of wanting to survive. Going through the Depression, the height of the Depression, 1931, asking for assistance, understanding and seeing where they were at that time and understanding that half of America was going through the same thing. Foraging for food, trying to get help. This lady was sick. He wrote to the president about getting relief, getting medical help for his wife. That just sort of stands out with me. Even to the point now that having read that I'm not a religious man, I'm a spiritual man, but having read about him actually being or acknowledging God, which at that time, for what he had to go through, probably would have made me question God. Okay, but I mean, his faith says, hey, in spite of that, hey, I'm turning to God here and I'm going to acknowledge God. And so that means a lot to me as well.
You found a booklet where you were saying there's been this question about how he was able to communicate with people in Florida without the postmaster intercepting the mail, and you may have found a clue to that, right? Maybe a code, you found some codes, yeah, like a code book perhaps?
Well, I think we sort of came up with that through the letters of, how they were able to connect.
The $5.
The $5, that was mentioned a lot. We went over that quite often with these letters. She often talked again, Mita Whiteman, about her illness. She was ill a lot. But then we also found letters where there were other parties involved, other people that she mentioned in these letters. There were letters from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, people that she knew in Philadelphia that Johnson also knew that he connected with. She even visited Akron. But again, the codes to me, it was sort of coded because you have this $5 was often mentioned in the letter. If you have $5, I need $5, please send me $5. Thank you for the $5. She said that she wasn't able to work since 1940, and a lot of these letters were written around circa 1943, 1944. And according to one letter that I read, Mita was a chef and a cook living in Florida.
That's somebody else's turn.
She's gonna get it. Nice, steady.
So you're able to go through letters, personal letters, kind of look like, also other documents look like maybe budgets or ledgers.
Yes. There were letters pertaining to, that they actually owned cars, going all the way back to 1927. They owned cars, and he and his wife, they were registered. There were a few problems. I think we need to do a bit of more research because apparently Mita owned property in Sicklerville, New Jersey. I don't know if he was a co-owner, but somehow they were paying taxes on this property. And her name was often mentioned on these documents.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I thought that was really interesting.
Very interesting. Okay.
No, you have to stay. You got to go. You don't have to go.
Watch your foot.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we kind of, we have kept you for hours, so we can wrap up, and yes. Oh, yes, yeah.
I'm good.
I hate when people feel like they have to sneak away.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you. This has been
Thank you.
fabulous. Yeah.
I have something I'd like to say.
All right.
I want to thank my grandmother, Florida Hurt. for keeping all of these documents is almost like a setup. Just that
I didn't know.
I had no idea. She kept a lot of important things.
Yes, you did.
And we've got some documents that we can work with, and I just want to thank my grandmother.
Yes.
I want to thank her.
Because a lot of people don't have any documents at all relating to the past. So
And she did know her. They did meet, according to the letters. They did meet. She was familiar with Florida May. And she would always acknowledge in the letters, give my love to Florida May and family.
Mita Windemeyer.
Yes.
Or Weideman.
Weideman.
Weideman, yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to track down C.C. Collins' family and see if they know anything about what he did and why he had to up and move, and then Weidman also. Big reunion
All
at
right.
Paul's house with okra.
Yay.
It's got lots of
And the
okra.
Mack family.
Yeah, a lot of okra.
Yes,
The
we'd
Mack
love.
family.
The Mack
Yes.
family.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Right, because he had brothers.
Yeah, I'd love to meet them. I'd love to meet those people.
I know. Well, this is only the beginning. We have, I think, a
Yes.
lot to work with now, right?
Okay.
Is that a wrap?
Any last momentous word you want to say?
I want to thank all of you all.
Yes.
Thank you all of you.
Yes.
Starting with Curtis Mickelson, connecting that particular day, that day I'll always remember. But you all coming from Florida, your kind and gentle spirits, your willingness to reach out, your willingness to help, willingness to walk us through this process towards reconciliation.
Yeah.
So I thank all of you.
Thank
I
you.
honor
Welcome.
your
You're welcome.
presence.
Yes.
You're welcome, but thank you too. Really,
Thank you.
Thank you.